My fiancée asked for a break to explore her options with her ex-boyfriend, completely unaware that she had just signed the eviction notice for our entire life together. I have spent the last few months wondering how I ever let myself become a spectator in my own life. For 6 years, I lived in a beautiful brownstone in the Back Bay, convinced that I was the luckiest man in Boston. Elena was the anchor of my world. We had met at a gallery opening in the South End, and from that night, everything felt curated for a future that seemed guaranteed. She was sophisticated, sharp, and possessed a quiet intensity that drew people to her, a trait I once admired until it became the very tool she used to dismantle our relationship. We were the quintessential Boston power couple. I handled risk management for a firm in the financial district, and she navigated the competitive art world of the seaport. When I proposed to her on a crisp October evening while overlooking the Charles River, I truly believed I was securing the final piece of a perfect puzzle. We spent weeks debating the merits of a ceremony at the public garden versus an intimate dinner at a historic estate in the North Shore. For a while, the vision was singular and shared. Then, the shift began. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Elena's focus drifted. The excitement of planning, which had once been a source of genuine bonding, transformed into a chore she treated with growing indifference. Every time I brought up a deposit or a guest list, she retreated behind a wall of vague excuses about her workload or her need for quiet. I convinced myself it was the pressure of the upcoming season. I told myself that high-functioning people often go through periods of withdrawal. I was wrong. I was simply refusing to acknowledge that the person I was building a life with was already emotionally detaching from the architecture of our future. The cracks became impossible to ignore during a night out at a popular spot in Fenway. A group of us decided to play a game of candid confessions. It was meant to be harmless, but when the topic shifted to regrets and past flames, Elena didn't hesitate. She spoke of Marcus, a man from her university days, someone who had treated her with such disregard that her friends had spent years helping her piece her self-esteem back together. The way she spoke of him was nostalgic in a healthy way. It was obsessive. The table went cold. She tried to laugh it off as a lapse in judgment, a fleeting thought, but the mask had slipped. In the weeks that followed, the behavior patterns intensified. The late nights in the seaport, the constant checking of her phone with that guarded, secret smile, and the sudden, manufactured distance became our new normal. I was no longer a partner. I was a roommate who had become an inconvenience. I was living in a home filled with the furniture we had chosen together, yet I felt like a stranger passing through a museum of a life that was currently being erased by the person who had helped me build it. The final blow came on a Tuesday night. I returned early to the brownstone, hoping to salvage a connection that felt like it was fraying at the edges. I found her staring at her screen, the light reflecting off her face, detached from the space we occupy. The conversation that followed was not a dialogue. It was a unilateral declaration of her intent to abandon our engagement to re-explore her history with Marcus. She looked at me not with remorse, but with the cold expectation that I would wait, like a loyal subordinate, while she tested the waters of a past failure. In that moment, the man she thought she knew, the man who would wait for her to come to her senses, ceased to exist. I realized then that I wasn't just losing a fiancée. I was finally waking up to the reality that she never valued the foundation we had built in the first place. The realization that I had been reduced to a fallback option ignited something dormant within me. There was no explosive argument, no screaming match in the quiet of our Back Bay living room. Instead, a chilling clarity took hold. As she packed a bag, ostensibly to stay with friends in Cambridge while she pursued her fantasy with Marcus, I remained remarkably calm. She walked out the door believing she had left behind a man who would pine for her return. She had no idea that her departure had effectively triggered the immediate liquidation of our shared reality. The following morning, I moved with the precision of a project manager. The brownstone was in my name alone, a fact she had conveniently overlooked during her recent bouts of self-reflection. I secured a real estate agent with a reputation for speed in the current market, and by the end of the day, the property was listed. The timing was impeccable. I began systematically dismantling our shared life, not out of petty spite, but as an act of absolute efficiency. Every piece of art she had hung, every piece of decor that signaled a life together, was gathered and boxed. I did not take these items to her. I hired a professional courier service to transport them to the address she had provided, along with a brief, final note acknowledging that her request for space had been granted in full. In our social circle, the rumors began to swirl, but I refused to let anyone dictate the narrative. When mutual friends reached out, confused by the sudden shift, I offered only the unvarnished truth. Elena had decided that her past with Marcus was worth more than our future. The reaction was immediate. People who had long walked on eggshells around her fragile temperament began to see the situation for what it was. By stripping away the performative nature of her public persona, I let the facts speak for themselves. My career trajectory also shifted in alignment with this newfound autonomy. I had long harbored a desire to transfer to our firm's international division, specifically the London office, a city I had always admired from afar. The application process, which I had previously put on hold to accommodate her preferences, was fast-tracked. With the house sale progressing and my ties to Boston becoming increasingly tenuous, I leaned into the work with the intensity that surprised even my colleagues. Elena's reaction to this transformation was one of genuine panic. Her messages, which had started as casual check-ins, devolved into frantic, accusatory demands. She struggled to comprehend why I was not waiting in the void she had left behind. She accused me of cruelty and of ending things too quickly, as if I were somehow obligated to grant her the time to test drive her ex-boyfriend while I remained in a state of indefinite suspension. Each time she reached out, my response remained consistent and sterile. I was not interested in the drama of a reconciliation, nor was I interested in explaining why she had lost the privilege of my presence. Watching her scramble to regain control over a narrative that had already slipped through her fingers was, in its own way, a testament to how far I had distanced myself from her influence. I was no longer the man she could manipulate with tears or promises of future counseling. I was a man who had recognized the value of his own time, and I was finally ready to leave the city and the shadow of our failed engagement behind. The final weeks in Boston became a study in detachment. The brownstone sold significantly above the asking price, a swift conclusion that rendered my departure from the city both inevitable and necessary. The news of the sale reached Helena through the grapevine, a reality check that finally shattered her belief that I was merely performing a temporary retreat. She drove past the building to see strangers moving in, a sight that seemed to finally crystallize the permanence of her choice. Meanwhile, the farce she had orchestrated with Marcus was unraveling with predictable speed. Through the network of acquaintances we once shared, I learned that their attempt at a rekindled flame was far from the romantic reunion she had envisioned. Marcus, true to his historical form, was not interested in building a life. He was merely interested in the thrill of the chase. Once the novelty of the situation wore off, he cast her aside with the same callousness he had displayed years prior. The irony was palpable. The man she had chosen to explore over our engagement had ultimately confirmed exactly why he was a mistake in the first place. The professional fallout for Elena was equally severe. Her reputation as a curator relied heavily on trust and professionalism, and word of the way she had handled our commitment spread through the tight-knit Boston arts community. Clients who valued stability began looking elsewhere, and her attempts to paint herself as a victim of my coldness on social media backfired. She resorted to posting cryptic, desperate pleas about resilience and growth, but the audience she once commanded had largely turned away, seeing through the artifice. Her sister even reached out to me, confirming that Helena was in a state of professional and personal disarray, still insisting that she had expected me to be there to pick up the pieces once her experiment failed. My transition to London was seamless. The city offered a fresh canvas, far removed from the memories of the Back Bay. I dove into a new rhythm. Early morning runs along the Thames, engaging in local interest groups, and focusing on the international projects that had once felt out of reach. Being surrounded by a team that prioritized vision and growth rather than the maintenance of personal drama was an immense relief. I even found myself mentoring younger analysts, sharing the lesson that one's trajectory should never be anchored by the indecision of another. My final interaction with Elena was brief and clinical. She had sent a desperate email demanding access to old cloud-stored files, claiming they were essential to her history. I had long since purged those digital archives, having no need for the remnants of a chapter I had already closed. My response was a single, definitive sentence. The past few years had served as a necessary education in what I did not want in a partner. I no longer feel the sting of the betrayal. Instead, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Had she not revealed her true character when she did, I might have committed to a lifetime with someone who viewed our bond as a temporary placeholder. Instead, I am thriving in a new country, liberated from the weight of someone else's confusion. The experience taught me that when someone shows you they view you as an option, the only rational move is to remove yourself from the list entirely. I have moved on, and in doing so, I have found a version of my own life that is better than anything I could have built with her. The lesson was costly, but the resulting freedom is absolute.